that AI makes such a difference in genetical research, in finding new drugs, new molecules there.
Eventually it will come down to a lot lower costs because there's no reason to host such a giant AGI model to, I don't know, move an item from A to B, for example.
The Elon Musk kingdom. Welcome to another episode of the Chris Roadmap Show, where every week we discuss about the latest developments in AI, what this means for the enterprise and for you in your business. And as usual, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Chris.
Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here again.
And Max.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be back.
In our fourth episode of this show, we have quite some topics to cover. There is a lot that we have to discuss this week. We have on one side the latest racing round of Elon Musk, Grok AI startup, 6 billion in total. We'll also be discussing about Amazon AWS, which historically has been the leader in cloud computing, but we'll debate if is this still the case in the age of AI. We also have a conversation on the developments that have happened in AI for science and academia. Is this being something positive, or maybe there are some caveats? Also, what this means for inventions, the capability to invent, is AI impacting? And we'll be closing with some discussion about what these very high, lofty rounds mean for the ecosystem and what are VCs interpreting behind by investing this type of money in those startups. So let's get started with our first topic, which is the development that Grok AI, Elon Musk startup, raised $6 billion. And just to give a bit of background, Grok AI started as this idea of Elon Musk to try to do things a bit different from OpenAI. He was one of the founding members, so to say, one of the founding investors of OpenAI. But then at some point, he became, let's say, disillusioned with how things were developed. In fact, he was proposing, let's have a hiatus of 6 months of no development because it's a way we can understand what's going on. At the same time, he was seeing how much money was being raised by all these companies and say, hey, maybe I can do something. And here we have it, 6 billion raised for Grok AI. Max, you're here, the investor. How do you interpret this? How do you see this?
Good question. I actually think Elon wanted to build Grok AI as a direct competitor of OpenAI. I think that he was quite open about that. And he didn't believe in that, close partnership with the different organizations, but more of an open source model. I think it's funny how, he's building Grok AI. I think I saw a video about him, a picture of him actually receiving, I think, the first GPU for OpenAI from Jensen Huang some time ago. So now he's back at it again. So number one, I think he's trying to do, a competitive, build like a competitor to OpenAI. I think that's a good thing. Number two, I think he will be joined by some of his former colleagues that left the OpenAI, which has some, idea about, building safety AI, etc., as well as, being a competitor to, OpenAI. I think third thing, if you think about lofty valuations, I think they just raised a Series B at 6 million and 28 million posts, if I'm not wrong. I don't think it's that crazy if you think about the potential use cases that this could be implemented. As we have talked about previously, we don't know if it's going to be one model to rule them all. I think there is space for more models in this market. And if anyone can do it, probably Elon Musk, given his track record, right? He has a track record of building really, really hard businesses, from solar to electric cars, now to AI, to spaceships, to satellites. I don't know how he does it, but I am in awe, if you will. So my sense is, if you're a venture capital investor, you always bet on opportunity like this because it's all power law. All you need is that one person to change people's life. If you're a banker, which some of my ex-colleagues used to tell me, when you see Elon Musk, you see chaos. You turn away from chaos. But I guess if you're a venture, that's not how it works. So yeah.
And just one small correction that I just realized is Grok is the model, just like GPTs from OpenAI, but the company is called XAI, which Elon Musk always loves to put X everywhere. So XAI, the company, in fact. But one thing that I was thinking about was In the end, all these models, they try to find some monetization by selling to the enterprise, by trying to have some enterprise package. And at the moment, there is not really something on offer from OpenAI, but I imagine it's a matter of time. Nevertheless, Chris, from an enterprise perspective, from a buying perspective, do you see companies adopting XAI offer? So if we look at, for example, a survey that was released on March from this year from A16C, this famous venture capitalist fund, they were saying that pretty much 40% plus of the market belongs to OpenAI. So you see companies, enterprises migrating from OpenAI or anyone else to XAI.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, when I looked at the topic, I was actually looking at what do the Magnificent Seven actually do in terms of their AI strategy. And I exclude Tesla for now, just because it's also Elon Musk world, and also because we're in the automotive sector. But if you look at this top six, we talk about Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Alphabet or Google, Amazon, and Meta, right? And let's look at what they do in terms of AI. And I find it very interesting because it's almost like this playing field is getting defined right now. Right, as you say, OpenAI having 40% right now of the market. I mean, Microsoft obviously very strong advocate and a big investor into OpenAI. You have Nvidia that obviously is dominating on the GPU side, but also invested into 5 companies, actually quite on the application side, from self-driving trucks to medical imaging. Then you have Alphabet, obviously developing its own Gemini, an AI solution with DeepMind. Then you have Amazon, who invested into Anthropic or Cloud as the chatbot. Also, by the way, Salesforce invested into them. And then you have Meta with its own Llama LLM, right? I think a conversation that is currently happening on the internet is what about Apple? What does Apple do? And it actually turns out that Apple has invested into 32 startups and no, sorry, not invested, actually acquired 32 startups within AI to actually enhance their hardwares from Vision Pro to iPhone, etc. And at the same time, I think there was also the news that Apple is partnering with OpenAI and also in talks with Google to also include the software, or bringing in the Gen AI solutions into their software. I think from that perspective, it is quite interesting to see the different AI strategies of the big companies and how they actually deal with it. And to be very honest, apart from OpenAI or Anthropic, XAI, Llama, we're not really seeing much. Actually, before the podcast, I was even thinking, what do we think about the European landscape? I haven't looked into this, but yeah, that's sort of like what I'm looking at, or what I looked up. And when it comes to enterprises looking for the right solution, I think by far the biggest is still OpenAI. But again, I think it's a bit of a race right now of the big companies, big tech companies, and we will see who is going to dominate in the future.
To your point on the enterprise landscape, so for Europe, there are basically 2 companies that are trying to mix things around. One is based in Germany, Aleph Alpha. So this one, they were focusing on a model for the German language. They also have backing from, I think it's like the Schwarzman Foundation and so on. So pretty much big names in the German ecosystem. And of course, like the leading force in the whole AI European scene is Mistral from France, which is this open source company that is pretty much pushing out state-of-the-art models for free. And they compete pretty much with Meta's, Llama's models and so on. But this is really, as you say, there are only these two companies who are trying to do something on a massive scale in Europe. And back to the point of XAI, I have there a small anecdote on how really this is going. This is becoming serious on what Elon Musk is trying to build. So where even people I know directly, they have been approached to join XAI. And they were telling me that the last selection round at XAI is conducted by Elon himself. Yeah, so if you want to join his company, you have to interview directly with him. And I'm curious to see how this develops, because so far you can only really use, so here, Grok, this model within X/Twitter. And that's pretty much it. I don't think that you can use it anywhere else. Will you be using it? So will you stick to any company specifically? How are you actually handling which model to use when? What about you, Max?
Very good question. I think the distribution of different models is super important. I think ultimately, you know, in at work, most of the, well, even now actually, I'm running things on Microsoft. I can see I have a co-pilot with me, which is obviously powered by ChatGPT. That gives me, I guess, I would say, a lot of easy access to that AI model itself, right? I don't know what's running at the back of it, but we're pretty sure it's coming from OpenAI. I think if you're a big user of X and eventually XAI is available on there, that kind of changes the narrative, right? So the distribution then becomes on Twitter. And then, oh, should I say X? And I think as we go along, we are going to probably find a lot of different types of models that are applicable in different types of distribution channel. What do I mean by that? Number one, you could have models with, Tesla's car, which is very different from the models that you would need from, X, for example. You don't need to sense your surrounding in order to write a tweet, but it would be good to, it would be good to write a tweet that is proper. I think the way I think about it is, models are, if you're trying to build like a AGI or general intelligence or artificial general intelligence, you want to have the biggest model possible ever. But if you're trying to do a very specific task, then it's all about where your models are being deployed and how are you going to reach the users. So far, when it comes to the enterprise side of things, I felt that, at least based on my observation, Microsoft is definitely beating everyone left, right, and center. Even if you're, Amazon has control of cloud computer space, even if you're Salesforce, it's just not the same when you have the operating system, because majority of the organization is going to use Microsoft to send emails. Is going to use that to receive emails. Going to use that to review documents, and and you name it. And I must say, even from a search, when you talked about search last week, even from a browser perspective, Edge is so much better because of Copilot. And I've realized myself beginning to use, I would say, Edge a lot more than I use Google, right? Because there's this extra features of Copilot at the side where I can just search things really quickly. So I find that, I guess, really appealing as a user. So overall, I think, really depends on where you're going to deploy the model, and how users are going to use it. How easily do they have access to it?
Yeah, I want to maybe just piggyback on this quickly. I think you're really hitting the nail here, Max. It's really all about integration, how easy, how frictionless it is. You can actually access the AI, and I mean, Microsoft obviously has an edge here, just because everything is integrated into their Office suite, and that's something that majority of us actually use at work. But I think also Google Drive and Workspace is another place where obviously Alphabet or Google is using its own Gemini AI to really integrate and do. And I think now it's really interesting to see also Apple thinking along those lines and trying to really integrate AI into its own operating system. And that's basically the three big ones that we have, don't we?
Well, we have in the closed models enterprise landscape, pretty much those provided by OpenAI. Then there is basically Anthropic, and so with the Claude, there is also a few others that are smaller. But besides OpenAI, that is closed source, there is nothing that is as close, yeah, also to OpenAI. But in the open model landscape, so where you get free models that you can download and use in your computer and so on, you have their Meta, you have their Mistral, You have there also quite some Chinese players. So Alibaba is releasing some models and so on. So a lot is happening on that side. But one of the things that I was thinking about this on this adoption is that, so you were saying, Chris, on Apple, right? That this has been, let's say, like on the quiet side, and there's a lot of expectation that many more things will release there, especially considering the hardware they have and also the ecosystem that they have. It's also on the AWS Amazon side, where they have not developed any specific model. Their platform is pretty much one where they say, we can run any model that you want on our own cloud, on our AWS environment. And this might be seen as a positive or negative strategy, where if we look at the recent developments, they have been losing market share against Microsoft. And we know that Microsoft has partners here with OpenAI. So we see that pretty much if you look at just 4 years ago, 2020, Amazon had a market share of 32% of the cloud computing market. Today it's around 30%, which sounds, let's say, like stable. But Microsoft has gone from 20% to 26%. And in fact, AWS had already been layoffs this year, or actually last year, had quite some. And they are trying to rethinker their AI strategy. Chris, you work a lot with startups, and you're advising them constantly on which decisions regarding technology and other aspects of their business operations they should take. So, Chris, you work a lot with startups, and when it comes down to technology choices, what do you advise to them? On one side, they're already working, for example, with AWS for the cloud computing. You tell them, hey, stick to AWS for their AI offering, or do you go and say, actually, they are not that advanced in what they offer. They do not have any unique angles. So instead, adopt Microsoft Azure, even if this means that you're adopting a new technology that is a bit alien to your ecosystem, a new build that you have to introduce into your financing, into your finance department. What do you tell to startups?
Yeah. And I'm sure you also have a view from a product perspective, but I think from a business perspective, it's always the question of like, okay, what's really the benefit of switching, especially if you're already in an ecosystem. And it could be considerations such as cost, it could be additional benefits, additional integration possibilities. I think it's very hard to like just generally answer this question. It really depends on the product or the use case or anything. But I think another perspective of that is obviously also to think about a make or buy kind of decision. Is it something you want to develop in-house? In particular, when it comes to maybe sensitive data sets, when it comes to very strategic key features or initiatives you want to keep in-house. Is it something that is plug and play that you can buy somewhere and you just integrate quickly? I think the time of implementation is also another consideration next to cost. So those are some ideas. But what about you? What do you think about it, Rob?
So, in fact, I was just last week at the AWS training day where they were having a full day session on one of their technologies. It's called Amazon Bedrock. And what I could see that is a little bit like the AWS angle is on adoption and making this easier as possible, meaning they might not have a unique model, they might not have a unique set of technologies, but they're trying to make it very easy for developers and semi-technical profiles to use technologies. So they have nice user interfaces, click here, click there, and you can deploy it and so on, which pretty much eases out how we can use these models. Because, for example, we are talking here about something like Mistral and their open source models. But how Mistral releases their models is that they spread it out on torrents. Yeah, so we know torrents from all this piracy and downloading illegal movies and so on and so forth. They pretty much spread them through torrents. You download them and pretty much you have to put it yourself. So for someone who is, let's say, not into is not really into the weeds of all this ecosystem, and then they just want to have some functionality that enables them to have like a chatbot. The Amazon offer makes it much more simpler because they have already their latest version of, for example, Mistral or other models. And with a click, you can pretty much start using them. So I was quite attracted to what they're using. And I do think that on one side, we talk about technology, we talk a lot about what is best and what is the latest, but we should not forget also the topic of adoption. And here, if you make it easy, then I imagine they will come. So Max, in your case, you were all the time interacting with established enterprises, the banking sector and so on. When you are in discussions with technology leaders in this sector, do they bring up AWS? Are they saying rather we should be using Microsoft Azure, or for example, the Google Cloud, so where they have also the Gemini models? What are you hearing?
So based on, I guess, my interactions, a lot of them are on Microsoft Azure, simply because of OpenAI and the entire, closed system of Microsoft. Because a lot of large enterprises, at least the one that I know, are very entrenched with Microsoft. They probably find it really hard to move away. I think the thing about regulated industry is that you can't really have just one cloud provider. Some organizations, or should I say, some regulators actually dictate that you need to have a plan for a second cloud provider just in case something goes down. I think that is really in place. So I think it depends on where you're coming from. I think even from AWS perspective, a lot of it started with, I guess, startup the ability to host their solutions on AWS, and I can see they doing something similar even in this AI space. What do I mean by that? So you have your Microsoft Azure, basically, OpenAI uh, will use exclusively only Microsoft's Azure as the hosting partner. Like it's written there, it's part of the strategic investment. If you want to say, that's probably one of the best strategic investment that Satya did. And then on the other side, you also close yourself out from other models, right? He obviously bet on his horse which one's going to win. I think Microsoft could potentially do, I guess, a lot of the things that Amazon is doing, but only with OpenAI. But what if Amazon take another route, basically make it easier for people to just deploy all kinds of open source models, right? That gives you like a barbell effect, right? So if you're in corporate, maybe you're so captured within Microsoft's ecosystem, so you get stuck with it. But on the other side, if you're, I guess, smaller startup, you want to try out different models. There's also possibility on the other side of the spectrum. So it's kind of come down to like the strategy on who they want to target, and eventually that will flow down to how and what they're going to build next. I think Amazon has always been very successful because they were hitting the startup ecosystem when they started, right? It was the startup that was trying to build the SaaS movement online, for example. So I think to a certain extent, I felt that they're going back to their roots, really, to try to cover the breadth and depth of whatever they do in cloud, but also do the same breadth and depth in AI models, but probably open source models. So it could be a strategy not to deploy, not to create models themselves. Just a thought. And it's quite interesting to see.
Yes, I'm also quite excited about how this turns out to be, because there are a little bit of two schools of thoughts here. On one side, there are those who say the edge in the AI race comes from releasing new models, having the latest technology, and so on. Whereas others says no, having your own model is a little bit of a zero-sum game, where anyway 6 months later it has been already replaced, already been outdated, there are betters and so on. And in fact, it comes down through distribution, through making it easier for others to adopt. So it seems AWS is on this second route of saying, let us ease adoption and let us not fight for being the latest and the one releasing new technologies, but just making it easier for the average enterprise developer to adopt that. Which, again, going back to XAI, comes to the question of what will they be doing? How will they be monetizing? So here, their Grok model. So will it be through just their pure consumer products, through, let's say, like having it on Tesla, having it on Twitter X and so on? Or will it be some enterprise offering trying to compete with Google, AWS, and so on?
Just a question, Rod, just to write on that. Is Grok AI open source, right? I
Actually, it's something where they took it, so it's something where they didn't start from scratch, but they took already an existing model for this. And not only that, but also there has been all these some memes and a little bit of making fun of. So where it seems it also has been trained with data generated by OpenAI. So in fact, at some point there were some screenshots I could see where you could ask to Grok AI, and then so Grok AI will answer something with, "I was trained with OpenAI, so GPT and so on." So it seems that Elon was using that, which, in fact, if that were to be the case, is a little bit of against the terms of use of OpenAI, where they do not allow you to do this of generating data to train other models using their models.
Interesting.
And
And
the other thing that I wanted to discuss was on the impact that AI is having, not only in the enterprise for business and so on, but also how is it affecting science and academia, where you could say one of the best use cases of working with the generative models, it is for creative writing, for having it generate text for you. And this is actually quite efficient. And we can use this same technique to generate articles for publication, not only for having them as, let's say, a co-author or one of the main authors for our article, but also for assessing them. For anyone who is not familiar with how science works, is pretty much you submit an article to, let's say, like a magazine or a conference, and a set of reviewers look at them and then they assess it. They give their comments and they also rate the article. And based on the result of this set of uh, judges, it is decided if it goes for publication or not. So we can also see here that technically we can also use any type of AI to act as a judge, such that instead of a human reviewing the articles, it is in fact an AI. How do you see these developments? So Chris, do you think that this is something positive in that we might have faster and easier generation of knowledge, or is this regurgitation of existing facts, and by removing the human, then in the end we are not really understanding what is happening, but just churning out whatever in a model that is actually that can hallucinate, or just publishing, so whatever it comes out from it. How do you think about that?
yes, great question, Rod, about the application of AI in the research field. And to be honest, it's not surprising me because again, what do we really use all these chatbots for nowadays? It's better writing, it's absorbing and analyzing data, and it's also summarizing data, right? And I think I can totally see the application in the academia and science research field, just being able to analyze tons of data and documents and getting summarizations of that. Obviously, I think another really great idea around science, and I remember my days when I had to write my science papers, where I'm not a writer, right? So it takes quite a bit of time for me to write something, and it must be much easier for a journalist and a writer actually to write words and sentences that are appealing. And I think there I do see that AI is quite powerful to help the science community to get across their ideas, their research much better. In fact, I think there were also studies done, tests done, which texts appeal better to people. And it seems like the AI actually wins here. And I think it's like, what, 60% of people in a survey preferred text written by GPT versus perhaps like 35 or 33% of survey people liking the human version of it better. And I think that's already really telling. And I think, yeah, AI can be really used in powerful ways to make sure that, science get accelerated and therefore also innovation.
And taking this from an enterprise perspective, in investment and in the banking space, it's very common to release research notes, to have some memorandums on should we invest in this, should we invest in that, so what should investors should do, and so on, is, let's say, the bread and butter of investment banking. So Max, how do you see now all these AI developments in creative writing, in research, and so on, impacting what is supposed to be the core task of an investment banking analyst?
Yeah, I totally think that, with all the AI and the ability to write, it's already impacting how we write stuff today. So, for example, if you want to write something, a lot of communications are still being done via email. If you want to write an email to someone senior, summarizing what are the key information, you could possibly use Copilot, right? If you're on Outlook, to basically tell you what to write. Or if you finish writing it, you could have Coach with Copilot, in which they will summarize, your email, give you some pointers, and which you then, take it or leave it. So there's already some of that. And on the other hand, you could also use Copilot, right? So this is what I'm going to write to who, and then they will generate some sort of structure which you can then take that and try to send it out. So when it comes to investment memo, everyone is different. It's about storytelling ultimately, right? Understanding where the market is, what the company does, how big is the market, blah blah blah. So it just goes on and on. So you could potentially just use AI, give them all the right information, and write that out. And I heard, I guess, from a few folks, from Microsoft, right? And basically, you could also do that in a, I would say, pictorial format that is suitable for what you want. For example, what you do is you go. There's this thing called Copilot Studio where you can just go online, search for whatever information that you need, and then on the other hand, you can point it to, I don't know, SharePoint, which is Microsoft's Dropbox, and then use that and say that I would like all this information to be written in this format based on all my past documents that you've written. Could you do that? And that will just create what it is. So that basically removes, I would say, I don't know, 80-90% of some of the, logo aligning of investment banking analysts, right? Or any sort of analyst that is creating decks. So that basically changes how we think about things. I guess that is the, I would say, the deployment of, I would say that we'll call that delivery, right? And on the other hand, there's also the thinking part, which I find it quite troublesome if, or worrisome, if we're outsourcing all our thinking to AI. Like us as humans, we never truly grasp certain type of concepts, and I find that, I guess, worrisome in my head. But I do agree, though, not everyone will use it, to replace their own thinking. They will use it to supplement their thinking, which is where I'm a lot more pro about, right? So being able to access information so that eventually you see something click in your mind. I think that's a very good thing. It's the same thing when it comes to, I guess, writing, I don't know, reading a financial models thousands and thousands of times so that eventually you understand, when something goes up, which part of the financial model actually moves, right? Is one of the reasons I think Warren Buffett said this a long, long time ago. He said, people like to collect cars for whatever they do. He likes to collect old financial statements because that's what he does. He just reads financial statements over and over again so that something click in his head. I believe in science and research in academia, we need to, I guess, do a lot of that, right? That's why they spend a long time doing one thing over and over and over again. So I guess AI could be used both, I guess, good way and bad way, if you will. So it's really up to that person. I don't think it should replace the way we think. I think it should supplement the way we think and the way we do things. That's how I think about it.
On the side of discovery and understanding new knowledge, coming out with inventions, here, Chris, do you see that AI is having any impact? So is it so that we are finding out new things that we didn't know about that is helping us be more inventive, so to say? Or is it that we're just regurgitating existing knowledge and as a result there is no new development?
Yeah, I think next to the way we use ChatGPT on a day-to-day basis, I think this to me is like the most groundbreaking path that AI can actually contribute to humanity, which is in all fields of science, making advancements. And Max, what you describe of someone having to sit down and look into financial statements over and over and over and over again. Essentially, what you're saying is that we need to train our human brains on inferences, right? So basically, we see lots of similar patterns, and because of that, we can then infer that probably in the future this particular company will also perform that way. And I think I wonder if we can actually learn something from AI here, because AI does it much more efficiently. And we see this in the application of science, right? Like where we either on the material science front, we discover new molecules. We see that AI makes such a difference in genetical research, in finding new drugs, new molecules there. But also in fields such as math, or we know about deep minds go engine that actually defeated the Go master. We see this on the chess front. So different, even you would imagine even deterministic games such as chess, you would be able to find better performing algorithms. I find totally fascinating. And just to make it a bit more tangible for our audience, I think I just saw an article about a molecule that was discovered by AI, and it's an antibiotic that has the capability of killing E. coli. And it's a new molecule, and it was basically found by AI and training it with 2,500 molecules, and running it, I think, another 6,000 compounds on it. And this is really what is so that determines the speed of our scientific research today, which is trial and error, and trying to go through all these compounds. And now we have a tool that makes it so much easier and so much quicker to finding these new compounds. I think on another hand, I think it's very important then to really double check and to check the quality, right? So we talk about hallucination being one of the downside of AI. Not everything works. A lot is invented by AI that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think that capability that we now have, this ability to be able to find these discoveries much faster, will accelerate so many industries, and I find it really exciting.
And making this also tangible for the audience, if we think about the enterprise, bread and butter also in the enterprise is in the space of sales, creating white papers, case studies, all of one pagers and so on, which require entire teams of copywriters, marketing managers, designers, and so on. Do you see them being replaced by an AI that is pretty much churning all day new publications, new white papers, new case studies, and releasing them on the enterprise websites of pretty much all companies that develop software or pretty much sell anything, Chris? Or you see this only as a supporting tool? Where will this go?
I recently spoke to a guy. I think he's like a master student or something, or just started work, and he was telling me that he was a content writer, and he was very morose, and he was like thinking about switching to, I think, design thinking consulting, which I probably is not better, but anyways, and we had a discussion around it, and he really sees this threat of being disrupted, and the AI writing the tags, and that's about it. And I think this is where the problem is, which is all more junior staff and managers are doing tasks that are very similar to what AI could also do. I think where people will probably evolve into is going to be like a quality manager, right? So evolving into working with the AI together and really finding workflows that leverages the speed of AI, but also making sure that you make the text, your text, the brand, with the tone of voice of the brand or whatever product you want to sell. So I do think that there's still steps where humans can put some human touch to it. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I can take a stab at that. I mentioned last week I was recently reading about David Ogilvy's book, right? The Rules of Advertising, with a giant thing called I Hate Rules. One thing about AI, you talk about invention earlier. Like advertising is always, coming up with something new that resonates with your I would say advertisee, whoever that you want to advertise to. It's ultimately to generate sales. And when it comes to invention, then I ask myself, right, can you generate new type of messages that relate to different type of people that would then eventually get more sales? Which means, with your Duff, for example, which is one of the most advertised item out there by David Ogilvy, which is it's meant for women with soft skin. That was the way they position themselves. Can you then position that slightly differently because of AI, because you never thought about what are the potential connections with other type of users? And I think when it comes to invention, it really, how I think about it is, if I were to define invention, is by taking different pieces together, you can put it together. Or if you're super, I would say amazing, you can come up with something entirely new. Somehow it just clicks in your head, and that becomes a new thing. Like I definitely more on the first one, which is combining different things. This is where I think AI will be, will really do a lot of acceleration, because whatever data you feed AI, they would then be able to find connections that you haven't been able to. I talked about this some time ago in an interview. Obviously, that didn't go well back then. Gen AI didn't exist yet. But if you put all the different data together to do credit score, you would find a very different, I would say, relationship with credit score, because credit score is so limited with just the few data sets that we have. And if you're able to pull, I don't know, different tags, different emotions when they're applying to it, the way they talk to you, etc. So if you pull all of that together, there is a possibility you would have, approved a loan that you would generically reject it previously based on some sort of rules that makes no sense. So I think by pulling all the different data sets together, AI allows us to see patterns that we haven't been able to see before, hence accelerating, I would say, a lot of the invention and some of the research that people were to do. So that will probably change everything we know today. I actually find that very exciting. If they're able to, unlock a lot of basic stuff, that would be good. But there's also, I guess, from a human perspective, we have to think even more first principle. We can't just take AI's answer as AI's answer. We probably need to know what exactly does it mean, right? So it's like, okay, now we have, found a new compound. How did that come about? Where is the connection? Where does the connection? Where does it click from that group of knowledge that I fed you, for example? So those are, I guess, the things that I'm particularly interested in, right? Especially on the explainability of it, and eventually that lead to invention, right? Because you'll be able to understand why have you made certain decisions from AI perspective.
Absolutely. And here we can see that in this segment, these two developments are happening. On one side, we believe we are being enabled by AI by being able to have access to new discoveries. So here Chris mentioning about proteins that are being now being discovered thanks to AI developments. But at the same time, we're seeing the societal impact of where this person you were talking to, Chris, is already worried about their career prospects and considering completely switching to a different direction because apparently there might not be a professional future in the space of creative writing, in copywriting. And this brings to our last point of the day, which is we are seeing these lofty VC rounds. For example, we were just discussing at the beginning of the show on XAI's 6 billion round, and this is extraordinary, but still pretty much daily we read that a company started and they raised 3 million, 5 million, 6 million, whatever that is. And in all these cases, it's always about a, let us call it like point solution. For example, a better writer for scientific writing, or a transcriber of a podcast like this one, or let's say like an avatar that helps you onboard and so on. So it's always for a very specific use case. And in theory, if we think about it, if we were to have rather soon a general artificial intelligence, so the so-called AGI, then all of these solutions might not be any more relevant, right? Because suddenly we'll be having something that is capable of doing everything and much more. And yet we're seeing these investments. So from the investment perspective, Max, you are in the VC space, you see what people are talking, what your colleagues are saying. Do they see that we are approaching to AGI? Do they think that these companies that are developing these applications, not with a dedicated specific model, but rather building on top of it, building the application layer, do they have an edge? Or is this something just very opportunistic and likely in 5 years they will be gone?
I think good question. I mean, still number one, the fact that they have lofty VC rounds, that probably means that they don't believe in AGI. Else, I do not know how they go through IC and then make their I would say overall argument. So I guess that's that, right? Number two, to your question, I think this is more of a philosophical one. Do you believe everyone can be a good writer, or do you believe a good writer needs to spend a long time doing one thing over and over again? I think the AGI conversation is yes, you will have an artificial general intelligence that can do everything. Can you do to the level of a professional? It's different, right? So you and I could read I guess, legal documents, but I am by no means lawyer, because a lawyer spend a long time looking at a lot of documents. So even with AGI, I would still think down the line you will have certain AI that are doing a lot more specific task at a lot better rate. At a eventually it will come down to a lot lower costs, because there's no reason to host such a giant AGI model to, I don't know, move an item from A to B, for example. So the way I think about it around this lofty VC valuation is that they do see an upending of potential software markets, right? Whatever that is controlled by certain software, which is majority of the stuff around the world, can and will be replaced by some sort of AI models that can do it a lot better. Self healing, self correcting, if you will. I think there's definitely an angle from that perspective. Then becomes, how big is the market? Where are those point solutions being implemented, and how are they distributed? I think those are questions that we do not know yet, right? At least not for sure. You will have conviction on where these solutions can be deployed. I know within the banking sector, a lot of AI models are already, I guess, coming. I would say generative AI models. So everything from taking your processes, making it better, from creating an agent that can speak to a customer 24/7, because some sort of loan officers are not going to work on Friday and Saturday, or even after office hours to process loans. But at the same time, your customers are expecting you to reply X amount of time. So we're seeing some of that already. And I think the point solution versus AGI, that there could be a world where both exists.
Flipping the
And
question, Chris, so for you, from a startup perspective, where you talk with teams all the time, how is it felt on startup land that the seed rounds are, for AI startups at least, the seed rounds are the new A rounds? And on the other side also, how do they see if this potential risk that at some point whatever they're developing might become irrelevant once we have AGI, let's say 5-7 years from now?
yeah, let's maybe start with explaining what AGI actually means, right? So we have algorithms that are really good in one specific field. For example, AlphaZero is an algorithm developed by DeepMind that's really good at chess. It's learned the different rules, and it basically, trained itself and became really, really good. But this is really specific to this use case. And when we talk about AGI, or artificial general intelligence, it's being good at a lot of things, but not necessarily being a specialist. It's more like a human that is able to run and able to reason, able to do all these different things, but probably even in the animal world, we have animals that are faster running, etc., etc. So again, when we talk about AGI, we talk about this general machine that's able to do a lot of different tasks really well. And I think, to your question, Rod, around, okay, we see these lofty rounds, VC rounds, we see point solutions, as you call them, or I would call them one feature solutions. It's almost like you have this one solution on summarizing marketing text, for example, a very specific case, so to speak, and you are asked to pay $20 per month for a subscription or something like that. The way I look at it is, to me, it's almost like this VC game feels a bit different in the sense that it's not necessarily about going IPO. I also don't know if IPOs are that attractive at this point in time after all these, not so great performing startup IPOs. But I think it's really about being bought or being acquired by one of those four players that we just mentioned before, or maybe there are going to be a couple of more depending on where you look at. But it's really about getting acquired by OpenAI. And why would they do it? It's because in order to get to this AGI, general machine, you need data, and you need structured data. And obviously these startups that are very specific in certain verticals and fields, they have trained certain algorithms on data sets for that particular use case. And so to me, it feels like in a couple of years, we'll see a spree of acquisitions of the companies or the startups that have figured out a certain use case, and they will be bought by the big ones.
You're right on the topic of what is AGI, what is, let's say, just a specific type of algorithm, specific type of technique, where we often think as something like a ChatGPT, the GPT models and so on, as if they were sentient, because they are capable of generating text that feels very human-like. But still, this is nothing compared to what is supposed to become the idea of AGI. So as you were saying, is pretty much having almost like a human that not only learns new facts, but also over time becomes much better than a human in pretty much all facts. So because it's like an all-rounder. And right now it's more like you were saying, is, let's say, a specific animal that can do something really, really good, run very fast, but they will not be able to reason as good, for example, as a human. So pretty much with this, we have covered a lot of ground for today. So if we wrap up what we discussed today, on one side, we said we have XAI having this massive round. We're discussing if they plan to have an enterprise product or just a commercial one, just integrated into the Elon Musk kingdom of different companies. Also, we're discussing what it means in this era of AI that AWS has not released a model, and on one side, we have seen how Microsoft Azure is growing very, very fast, and AWS seems to be lagging behind. We're also discussing what it means that AI now is capable of impacting science and research, for example, by discovering new proteins, but also by how a publication is done, and what this also means for the enterprise. Do we need copywriters? Will marketing departments start to disappear, or they become much more streamlined, much more narrower and smaller? And what this means also for the idea of startupping. If we're developing products that are very focused on a specific task, just do one specific thing, and with the acceleration of AI developments, if they might become obsolete in the coming years. With that said, it has been a fantastic show, Chris, Max. And for the listeners, remember to like, subscribe the show. And so always leave our comments, give feedback, tell us what we should cover, what we should say, what you don't like. And let's meet again next week for another episode of the Chris and Max Show. Great to have you here, Chris and Max.
Thank you, Rod.
Thank you.